Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford, and joining me to look ahead to this weekend, we have Inside F2 editor LA Wilshaw and Inside F2 writers Anna Blow and Michael McClure. Coming up on the show then, we reflect on an action-packed wet to dry feature race. Track limits were a big talking point this weekend. We get our panel's verdict. And do we have a new championship contender? We discuss the battle for the crown. Okay, but before we do all of that, there was some post-race penalties dished out by the stewards in the feature race today. So we're going to perhaps, go over the final standings because there has been a little bit of change. So Richard Verschoor was disqualified and as the team were not able to provide a post-race fuel sample, and a penalty for Jahan Daruvala as well means that Logan Sargeant claims his second feature race win in as many rounds after an up and down race for the American. Enzo Fittipaldi inherits P2, and incredibly Roberto Merhi gets a podium from P21 on the grid. Unbelievable drive from him. P4 for Dennis Hauger, P5 for Jake Hughes, which is his best result since Jeddah. A career best result means that Ollie Caldwell gets a brilliant P6 for him. Awasa, Yuri Vips, Roy Nissany and Liam Lawson round out the top 10. I mean, who would have predicted that top 10? Unbelievable. So now we've gone over that, let's get into it. You're very bored of me speaking. You're here to speak, to listen to our brilliant guests. So let's speak to them. We're used to some pretty frenetic races in Formula 2, aren't we, LA? But the first 10 laps of that feature race were, they're just, great. It's what Formula 2 is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I couldn't keep up with it. Obviously I write a few notes as it's going along, and I literally wrote the words, I can't keep up with this. Because, you're sort of looking down trying to write, and there's so much going on and so much shifting and changing. And even at the end, when they were all coming across the finish line, and, switching. And then it all switched again because of the penalties. So it was crazy. I mean, we thought last weekend at Silverstone was a bit nuts, but, F2 is just delivering, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing and fantastic, and if you have watched the F1, I think that they were trying to copy our Formula 2 this weekend a little bit. Don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think so as well. They're always trying to copy Formula 2, aren't they? Let's face it. Anna, welcome to the show. After the sprint race, I was a little bit worried that we might not have too much to talk about this weekend, but my word, did the feature race change that? What a race.
Yeah, it was an amazing race, and there was a lot of action going on. I was a bit worried as well after the sprint race, and then when I saw it was wet this morning, I was like, this is going to be a good one. And it was. Yeah,
the weather really did play a big part in that, didn't it? Michael, obviously in the US, a bit of an early start for you, but was it worth getting up for the feature race this morning?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was up at about 2 a.m. because I also had to watch the F3 race in the morning. So it was really a good way to kind of wake up. You get the F3 race is exciting. You got all the rain there, and then it continued for the F2. And I think it's one of those just really special ones where you get to see not only how these strategies play out with when you switch from wet to dry tires or which one you start on, but also you see a lot of driver skill. And I think we saw a lot of great drives from people who maybe haven't shined as much this season. It was just really chaotic, but it was a great chaotic mess. So I enjoyed it tremendously.
It really was, wasn't it? Looking forward to really sinking our teeth into what really happened. But before we do that, let's take a look at the championship standings off the back of this weekend. Felipe Drugovich still tops the standings, but he has a new nearest challenger. Logan Sargeant moves up to P2 in the standings and takes 21 points out of his lead to close the gap to 39 points. Teo Pourchaire will still back himself to be in the championship battle. He sits just 1 point behind Logan Sargeant in third. Jahan Daruvala, Enzo Fittipaldi and Marcus Armstrong round out the top 6. In the team standings, it's game on in the team standings. MP remain at the top of the table still. However, their lead has been cut to just 1 point by Carlin over Logan Sargeant's feature race victory. ART are sitting comfortably in third, but they'll be looking forward as they themselves are only 6 points off of MP at the top of the standings. Kramer, Hightech and Charouse round out the top 6. And as always, the full standings are available on our website, www.insidef2.com. Okay, let's start with our eventual feature race winner, Logan Sargeant. The only driver who started on the wets and really made it work, wasn't he? I'd say, it was a pretty good weekend for him anyway, without the penalty points or the penalties and him getting a podium and a points finish. But yeah, made even better by the fact that the penalties mean he wins the second feature race in a row, LA.
Yeah, it is absolutely unbelievable, and rightfully so. That obviously, if the others did go over track limits and the penalties that they received, then Logan would have won that race rightfully, in his own right. But yeah, he made those wet tyres at the beginning. Obviously, he did get a little bit bogged down. He did lose a few places on the start, and I was a little bit worried. I was like, oh no, what's happening? But then it wasn't long before he was going around the outside of Jack Doohan, and even that wet tyre was working for him once he sort of got going. And at the very end, he sort of said, I gave it everything. And you could clearly see that he did, even once he did get onto those slicks. Last weekend at Silverstone, after that race, I remember hearing him say something like, that was so hard, again over team radio. And he really is pushing himself to get these results, to claw these points. And it was only last weekend that I was saying that, it was a preview, wasn't it, where I was saying that the other two, Drugovich and Verschoor, really need to watch out. They need to watch out for the likes of Sargeant, and at that particular point, it was Dennis Hauger that were just sort of banging some points in and banging some results in. And I said, the top two guys need to watch out for these, especially Sargeant coming along. And here he is coming along, a bit like a freight train. And as we've seen in the last 2 seasons, the outright winner of the championship, it's all come to him in the second part of the season. And where the others have faded away, the champion has got the points every race and shown us what a winner and champion he really is. And I still probably feel it might be just a little bit too early to start talking about Logan being the champion, but based on what I've just said on the last 2 seasons, absolutely can. Don't forget, this is Formula 2. So he's my new favourite. Sorry, Theo, but Logan's my new favourite.
Logan Sargeant, favourite for the championship, LA Wilshire. Big call that is. But yeah, I absolutely love the move around the outside of Jack Doohan. That was brilliant, wasn't it? And he's really come into his own in the middle part of the season, hasn't he, Anna? He's looking in great shape right now.
Yeah, recently he's really coming, he's probably my pick for the championship as well now. He's done so well these past few rounds. So he is really, the others have really got to watch their back and try and take as many points off him as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Momentum is a big thing in Formula 2 and in motorsport and in any category. But as you say, LA, the champions are the ones who can carry that momentum into the second half of the season. We've seen that before. And, Michael, he has the momentum now, doesn't he? He's really going to be putting the pressure on, Felipe Drugovich. He's moved into second, not Teo Pourchaire anymore. It's Felipe Drugovich, isn't it? He's going to be looking over his shoulder.
I mean, who would have thought that, right at the beginning of the season, the top two are Drugovich and Sargeant. I mean, so many other people had Pourchaire, Vips, Lawson, even Dennis Hauger, Daruvala as their picks, and we've got these two. So it's really quite interesting how it's developed. And one thing I think that comes to mind, actually, a couple of things with Logan, is that he doesn't really make mistakes. We see this with some of the other drivers, a lot of the experienced ones. They're making mistakes. They're going off track, abusing track limits, even getting into crashes. And you just don't see this with Logan. I mean, he tapped wheels with Lawson today. That was a pretty minor incident, I would say, but otherwise he's kept it clean. If you think about Baku, if we hadn't had that safety car when Yuri Vips crashed, Drugovich wouldn't have finished that race. And that would have completely changed the championship picture and elevated. I mean, it wouldn't have changed anything for Logan, but it would have closed that gap a lot. So he's really just been clean. And the other thing is these rookies are really coming along. Since about Barcelona and Monaco, I would say. I mean, we've had Hauger take wins, Vesti's won, Doohan's won, Sargent's now taken 2 wins. Fittipaldi is not a full rookie, but I mean, he's pretty new. He's getting podiums. And we're seeing just this, I think, this changeover point where they're finally comfortable with their cars and they're really capitalizing on it. I think it makes for an amazing second half of the season because you really get to see how all these drivers are kind of meshing with their teams and what sort of direction will go for the rest of the season.
Yeah, completely agree. The rookies are looking really strong, aren't they? And yeah, Sargeant has the momentum and is the consistency as well. And he's been so consistent, and Drugovich has also been so consistent, and that's why they're probably the top two in the championship. That consistency, we've seen it before. But yeah, Richard Verschoor. I mean, poor Richard Verschoor. Very painful for him. But he can. Wow, I think he can take a bit of confidence from this weekend, can't he? LA starting P8, he gambled on the slick tyres, and it was a gamble that paid off. Across the line P1. Obviously, he didn't quite get that P1 due to the disqualification, but it was a great drive nonetheless, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Because he said in one of his interviews that he said let's risk it on the tyre strategy just moments before. I think it was on the grid, or wherever it was that decision was made. Let's risk it, and it could have been a different story. It could have been the worst story of the weekend, that it wasn't worth the risk. But obviously, we know sometimes these risks are the moments that win these particular races, and that was possibly his instinct, his gut instinct, of knowing his car, knowing his own capabilities so well. And I'm really gutted for him that obviously he was disqualified because of that fuel infringement. And we've seen this before, we saw it with Dan Ticktum, and we've seen it with other drivers too. Either was it Liam Lawson? I think, correct me, nod, shake your head if I got that one wrong. But it's absolutely gutting, because I think we're all quite neutral, even though we are sort of championing, one or two. We're very neutral, and we want all of these guys to do well, and if they make a call like that, then it's just absolutely fantastic. And and Michael and I were just joking just before we started recording, saying, we've both interviewed him in the last week, and it's our luck, it's the luck of the North Americans and the North British people that are giving these drivers their wins. So if anyone wants to win a race in Formula 2, just hit up me or Michael.
Yeah, perfect. We'll clip that and put it on socials. Any Formula 2 drivers, if you want to win next time out, these are the guys to speak to. Absolutely, we'll put them in touch. But Anna, we did say though, so 10.8 second win on the road. That's a big margin that he won by. Could he have fuel saved a little bit more if he knew that he was in trouble a little bit? Could he have, lifted and coasted on the last few laps?
Well, he had the space to. And everyone else behind him was trying to make sure they didn't go over track limits, because everybody was getting penalised for track limits, and they were all getting warned. So he probably had the space to fuel save, but it's whether he knew before he crossed the line that he needed to fuel save. It depends. I don't know how the driver to tell, and if the team get that information or what. But it's a shame that he didn't get the win, because he looked fantastic all weekend. And he was really on it in the race, and he had the speed and he had the strategy. So it's such a shame that he didn't actually get that win in the end.
Yeah, I think we're all gutted for him, but he will bounce back stronger. He said on social media he will not learn from it, but he will come back stronger. So, yeah, best of luck to him for the next race. Michael, I want to talk about Jahan Daruvala, the other driver who was penalised in the race, given a 20-second time penalty after a team personnel was drying the grid spot pre-race. I know rules are rules, but is that a little bit harsh to penalise a driver for someone else's actions?
I think it's a very difficult one. I mean, you listen to what the drivers are saying about track limits, penalties, and even all the other things, and they're generally pretty understanding of when they do need the penalties. I don't know what the deal was in Jahan's case in particular, but I think it is the case where they have to, the stewards' ruling said they weren't sure if it gave a performance advantage, but they just have to treat it as if it did. And I think ultimately they have to do it. It sucks for the drivers. It really does. Jahan drove a great race today. He had that incident on lap one, and obviously that maybe sort of dented his performance a little bit, but it's one of these things you just need to follow. And it is, the drivers are the ones that are obviously in a lot of cases paying for the seats. And it's their careers that are being advanced, but it is still a team sport. And these drivers do have to work with their engineers and their mechanics to make sure everything goes right. So it's one of those things, you win together as a team, you lose together as a team. And I think this is a case where Prema lost together as a team, and they're going to have to take it on the chin and bounce back. Daruvala's quite far back, not totally out of it, and I think he's had some great performances this year, so I'm sure he can bounce back in the next few rounds.
Yeah, a real shame for him because that would have been his best feature race finish ever since he joined Formula 2. So yeah, real shame for him. Okay, I want to talk about Roberto Merhi. What a story. P21 on the grid, all the way to second on the road. A 5-second penalty demoted him, but then he was promoted back up to the podium finish after getting a P3 finish. First Formula 2 weekend in over 3.5 years, LA. I mean, that's a pretty unbelievable performance, given that he hasn't stepped in a Formula 2 car for a very long time.
Yeah, what a statement to make, to be perfectly honest. There was some doubts about him coming back in, and there are people that might be sort of new to Formula 2 that don't know of him. He's floating around within the racing scene, work Le Mans, but his history in Formula 2 is with Campos, so he does have that connection, and maybe it seemed he was the right person for the job. And of course, he's standing in for the injured Ralph Boschung, which we're all sincerely hoping, can get on top of his troubles. And we see him again very, very soon. But it was really good to still see that second Campos car in the race, this weekend, and to see the smiley face of Ralph's big sponsor there on the side of the car. But he was very handy today. You rightfully said started in 21st. Obviously, the right tyres, or they were working for him, overtaking manoeuvres, side-by-side action from him. And it's probably one of the best stories of the weekend, to be perfectly honest. And despite that penalty, he got a penalty, kind of at the time added on, served the penalty, and ultimately has still finished in P3. Such a shame, and I think if we get the chance, we will talk about it later, but such a shame to miss out on those, not see him in those celebrations, because obviously that would have been the icing on the cake, really, wouldn't it?
Would have been. Absolutely would have loved to have seen him on the podium. He does get on the podium in the end. He actually could have won the race, given that Richard Verschoor got disqualified and he was second on the road. If it wasn't for those track limits, or the track limit infringement that got him the 5-second penalty. Obviously, he'll be buzzing with the result, Anna, but will he be looking and regretting the fact that he ran wide in turn one? I mean, it was 2 laps on the end as well, so close to the end of the race. Will he be regretting that slightly, or will he just be absolutely buzzing with the result that he's just picked up?
Well, he'll probably regret it slightly, but if you can't really help it if you go wide and get a penalty. You just gotta then continue driving to the best, which is what he did. Honestly, I wasn't expecting him to get anywhere near the podium or even the points today, but he really did show just what he's capable of.
Yeah, great result for him. Great story, probably the story of the weekend, as you say, LA. And also a really nice post on social media after dedicating the result today to the late Adrian Campos, saying how proud he was to achieve the result with Adrian's name on the side of the car. And yeah, obviously, as you say, LA, definitely wishing Ralph Boschung a speedy recovery. Not sure whether we'll see Ralph Boschung or Roberto Merhi in that car next time out, but if it is Roberto Merhi, definitely looking forward to that. Michael, track limits. Let's talk about track limits then. What cost Roberto Merhi that win? We were speaking on the live debrief about it. On the live debrief, we go live on YouTube and on Twitch after every race. First, Apex on Instagram said, once again, we need to be clearer on track limits. Other people as well saying that track limits have ruined the weekend. We caught up with Aaron Harper straight after the race, and this is what he had to say. Aaron, I want to talk about penalties. We have had a comment coming in saying, once again, the FIA need to be clearer on track limits. Is that a fair point? And do you think that track limits, I've seen a few comments of people saying track limits have almost ruined this weekend. Is that fair?
No, that's not fair comment to say that the track limits have ruined the weekend, because, and I know the commentators, I think it was Jordan King, mentioned this. Most other sports, so let's take football, for example, they play to the white line and not beyond. If the ball goes past the white line, it's a throw in, a corner, a goal kick, whatever, or it's a goal. It's defined, it's solid. There's no deviation from it. But in Formula One and Formula 2 or motorsport in general, there seems to be an allowance of, well, here's where you can go to, and you can have a little bit more. But racing drivers, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So to enforce the track limits harshly, it would seem, is absolutely the right thing to do, because it would then force the drivers to drive the circuit. And if they have to slow down a little bit more, they have to slow down a little bit more. And I think what we've also seen, looking back to last week at Silverstone, is drivers taking advantage of that little bit of extra leeway to flirt with danger a little bit too much. We saw how Nissany squeezed Hauger. We saw what happened to Guan Yu Zhou in the Formula One race. We saw the crazy action following the safety car in the Formula One race. Drivers need to know where the limit is. You can't force another car off the track, but if you are driving a corner too fast and you run wide, you risk damaging your car, and that risks, a crash. So if they know that they're going to get penalised and there's suitable deterrence, not sausage curbs, in that respect, then it only makes the racing better, because it really shows you who is really able to control their car and get the most out of it. And you have to say, Richard Verschoor did that perfectly today, because he got himself into a position where he didn't need to exceed track limits, so he could just drive the track, and he was still faster than everybody else at that point. So, he did the best job because he won the race and he stayed within the track limits. So I don't see why there's any reason for anyone to be upset about that, because it allows us to see who's doing the best job, not who can, take as much risk and cheat the most. That's what you do on a game when you're having a mess around with your friends. You see who can drive the wildest line or something. This is competitive sport. It needs to be appropriately regulated, and this hopefully is the first step in the FIA and race control sort of getting the ship in order.
Yeah, so Michael, that's what Aaron has to say. Do you agree? Do you think we need to be consistent with every circuit that we go to, just to avoid that confusion and that inconsistency?
Over the winter, I'm pretty sure they changed the protocols for how they how they enforce this. Last year and in years past, they had it sort of on a case-by-case basis. Every circuit was different. And they had kind of these zones that they were monitoring. So in Austria, it was turn 1, it was turn 3 on that tight hairpin at the end of the back straight, and then turns 9 and 10, obviously, which is where most of the violations occurred. And I know last year that caused a lot of issues. You had that F3 feature race. I remember that, where it was your sprint race where everybody was just getting demoted. Logan Sargeant actually was one who lost the podium in that, very ironically. And over the winter, they've changed this. I think there's new F1 race directors. They've changed it in Formula One as well. And it's sort of, I think, coming from the top, trickling down this new set of rules. And now it's just very clearly, you exceed the white line, your lap time is getting deleted. And that's how I think it should be. It's equal, it's fair for everybody. There's no kind of room for negotiation, really. And speaking to the drivers about it, I think I spoke to some of the F3 drivers about it for F1 Feeder Series. All of them were supportive of the new rules, even though many of them lost out from it. F2 drivers, hearing from what they had to say, it was the same situation. I think they all know, they appreciate the clarity, and they'll be disappointed if they lose the result. But I think they'd be more disappointed if it was a contest that had some manipulation or gray area, or if things weren't completely fair. And I think that's, I think they've done the right steps to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm pleased with how it's happened. It's a shame that we have all these changes at the end, but at least it's done correctly. At least no one is in the stewards room complaining long after the race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said in the past, and I'll say it again, that I think from a fan's perspective, the thing that really, is quite frustrating is the lack of consistency, and the fact that, all 4 wheels go off the track this weekend, and it's you're given a track limits warning. But elsewhere, we go elsewhere around the world, and all 4 wheels go off the track at one point of the circuit, and perhaps it's not a penalty. And you in some places you can go to one corner and go all 4 wheels off, and it's not a penalty. But on other parts of the track it is, because you gain a lasting advantage. And I think that's the thing that the stewards probably need to crack down on, isn't it? It's either one rule for every track that we go to and every corner we have, or it's no rules at all, if you like. Is that fair? Is that and also the other thing is, do you think that having the same stewards every race weekend, would that help the issue?
if you had the stewards every weekend, I think they'd probably be pretty burned out having the same discussions all the time. But I mean, I think it's one of these things, again, it doesn't really matter who enforces the rule. I think if it's clear enough, and I think that's what they're aiming to do. It refers, I think, Article, I don't know which one it is for F2, but I know F1 is Article 33 and F3 is Article 27. So it's one of those like driving things, and they just have to apply the policy. I think it's the right thing. I think changing the stewards won't help. Another thing that I know has come up a lot, we saw it last week, obviously the incident with Hauger and Nissani with the sausage curbs. We saw again a GT accident this morning that was very scary, and a lot of people bring up sausage curbs as a deterrent for track limits. But when you have clear rules, I think you can get away from that. If you get rid of the kind of murky lasting advantage thing, you don't need to introduce these extra elements of the track, which, as we've seen, pose a big safety hazard. So I think what F2 is doing, maybe it diminishes the being product, but it's ultimately, one, the safest option, and two, it's the most fair. So I'm pleased with the direction it's gone.
Yeah, let's hope the rules stay the same for the rest of the season, because as you say, it's probably the best way to address it. Moving on then, not a great day for our championship leaders. Felipe Drugovich, obviously we've said Théo Pourchaire as well. Logan Sargeant has jumped ahead of him in the standings. What are our thoughts in terms of Felipe Drugovich and Théo Pourchaire? A disappointing weekend for them, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course it was. And I'm sure that they're just as disappointed. Felipe still has a little bit of a cushion, of course. But as each race goes along, if he continues to finish lower down, off the podium or out of the points completely, then he will not win this championship. And that's a mathematical fact, a conclusion. So, yeah, I think that they started off the season really well at MP, and so did Felipe, and even Clement, had some quite good stints and some good races. But the others have either caught them up, which I kind of feel like somebody like Logan has, because although the Carling car wasn't really having any major issues, Logan puts things down to his, rookie mistake, his mistakes, his rookie season. And the more race weekends he gets under his belt, the more experience and the more he learns from those little mistakes that he was making. He's obviously showing us that he's not making them again. And somebody like Logan, in that sense, will run away with this championship. If they can continue to bring their weekend together and maximise their results on sometimes the chaos that's going on around them, because not forgetting that Logan didn't receive any track limit warnings or violations as far as I can recall or remember, and certainly not black and white flags, and certainly no 5-second penalties. So there are, I know that you've just had the discussion with Michael about the track limits, but some drivers can keep their cars within the track limits. Some drivers are capable of still completing laps and being able to keep their cars within them. So why can't they all? And if we were looking at tracks like Jeddah, Monaco or Baku, that white line would be a wall, it'd be a concrete wall, and it would be the end of the race. And so, I totally agree that those track limits should need to be adhered to, and the guys need to slow the cars down. But there was a little bit of inconsistency as far as Frederick, Vesti thought that other drivers were going off over that line, but they weren't being caught. I don't know who those were. I didn't see those, or I don't know if that was just something he thought was happening. But some drivers in Formula One felt the same. That there were other people maybe going across that limit but not getting pulled for it or not being spotted. So I don't know. That's just what other drivers are saying. That's not what I saw. But yeah, it's all. I don't know. What do you think?
These are the 20 of the best drivers, 22 of the best drivers in the world, right? And if you set the boundaries and say that they have to stay within the white lines, they should be able to stay within the white lines, in my opinion. And at least then you've got consistency for the rest of the season. I have to say, by the way, Frederick Vesti, very switched on. The point where he was following Yuri Vips on the main straight, and he said that Yuri Vips went off outside the lines on the straight to keep his tyres cool, was very switched on. I was impressed by him at that moment. Disappointing race for him. We've gone all this way into the podcast without even speaking about Marcus Armstrong, our sprint race winner. A weekend of two halves, I suppose. A dominating drive by him in the sprint race. A lights to flag victory, Anna.
Yeah, he did very well in the sprint race. I was very impressed with his speed, and he just looked on it in the sprint race. Like nothing, it seemed to be nothing could stop him. And today it just all fell apart for him. Like he didn't seem to get anything go right for him today, unfortunately. And it is a shame, but he seems to have weekends like this sometimes where he'll have an amazing race, and then the other race it's just he's nowhere, which is a shame, but hopefully he'll get all his problems sorted out and he can do well in the next few races.
Yeah, I think him and the high-tech team were a little bit gutted about today because they started on the slick tyres and they were right in behind Richard Verschoor. So I think they felt like they could have been fighting for the win again this weekend. But yeah, real shame for him. A really nice moment in the sprint race as well, Michael. Mick Doohan on the podium, giving Jack Doohan the trophy after the sprint race. That was, a nice moment, wasn't it?
It was really nice, and I actually asked Jack about this after the race, and he told me he had no idea it was happening. His dad wasn't there watching, and he walked over apart from me. His father's not there. He goes up, he sees his dad up there. He doesn't really know what it is, and it's just kind of like this story that you just develops, and I mean, you sort of maybe in hindsight know where it's going, but the thing I'm curious about is did race, like the organizers, did they plan this? Because obviously Jack had no idea, but I wonder if Mick sort of knew to maybe work something out, but it was really lovely. And I know LA, you've talked to Mick obviously, and I know it's great that he's so involved in Jack's career. Just to have that kind of person with, even though he's known for motorcycle racing, that's where he's a legend. I mean, he's just got all this experience built up, and I think he's just a great presence for his son. And it's wonderful to see, really, very heartwarming.
Yeah, very nice moment, wasn't it? One for the record books when we look back at the end of the season. LA, Ollie Caldwell, P6 finish and his best result of the season. Great result for him, right?
Yeah, I think up till now his best result was P13 at both Imola and Spain. So, obviously out of the points in all of the races. So of course, and he was barely mentioned today. I don't know if it was just me not tuning in or not, but he was just, I'm sure he didn't have a quiet race. I'm sure he was overtaking everybody who must have been to get that position, finishing in P6, but he just didn't get much of a mention. So I didn't really have many notes on him, but he's obviously done the right thing and got himself up to a really great points position in a very tough, tricky race. He's not been handed this result on a plate. He's earned that position, good and proper. He's kept his own race clean and obviously used his car and his tyres in the exact right way to finish in P6. And he's a really good guy. He's a really nice presence. He's got a great attitude and he's got a wonderful little team of people around him, including his performance coach who look after him. And of course, he's a Brit. So I wish him well.
Yeah, definitely great drive from him. Chose the right strategy. Obviously with the penalties, meaning he gets a P6 finish. Great for him. Okay, that's all we have time for today. My thanks to LA, to Anna and to Michael for joining me on today's show. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more Formula 2 content, and let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Hashtag the F2 show to get involved in the conversation. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.